Next up, we have Excadrill. This mole has been digging its way into fans' hearts since the 5th generation games, where it was Gym Leader Clay's strongest Pokemon, and its anime counterpart appeared in an excellent Pokemon Generations episode. Iris also had an Excadrill she raised from a drill burr while traveling alongside Ash. Today, we're going to be examining this subterranean Pokemon's effect on the competitive scene. And so we ask, how good was Excadrill actually? But first, let's talk about the sponsor of this video. That's right, it's ExpressVPN. With everything we do these days being on the internet, it's important to have the technology to keep your data safe and protected. Otherwise, your unencrypted data can be intercepted by people who have no business viewing it. That's where a VPN comes in. A VPN provides a private connection and a virtual server that prevents anyone from taking a look at the info you're sending out into the World Wide Web. And when it comes to VPNs, there's no better choice than ExpressVPN. So how good is ExpressVPN actually? Well, it's great, and I personally use it to keep my data safe and encrypted from even my own ISP. Your ISP can see every site you visit, whether you clear your browsing history or use incognito mode, and is legally allowed to sell that info to advertisers. But with a push of a button, ExpressVPN stops that. ExpressVPN has great, fast servers, so even if I get throttled, all I have to do is hit this button, and now I can't be throttled because I'm protected and it thinks I'm connected somewhere else. You just hit this button, it's as simple as that. And you can go to expressvpn.com/falseswipegaming or click on my link in the description box below to find out how you can get 3 months free when signing up for a 12-month subscription. And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Generation 5 was all about weather and the Pokemon that abused it. Permanent Sandstorm had been an OU staple for the previous 2 generations, but it never offered any direct offensive boosts to any Pokemon. Black and White changed that, with the addition of the speed doubling Sand Rush ability and the power boosting Sand Force ability. With Sand Rush, Excadrill defined the early stages of Gen 5 OU. It was faster than absolutely everything. No Choice Scarfer short of Deoxys Speed could outrun it in Sand, and Scarf Deoxys Speed was of course an extremely silly idea. This immense speed allowed Excadrill to make the most of its terrifying offensive capabilities. A massive 135 base attack stat, Swords Dance, and Stab Earthquake. It was instantly one of the most devastating Pokemon in the metagame, able to sweep at a moment's notice. It wasn't uncommon to see an even slightly weakened team completely powerless to stop an Excadrill rampage, especially since its choice of item made it tougher to check, a task already known to be difficult. Air Balloon was the standard, allowing Excadrill to turn its Earthquake weakness into an immunity until hit by another move. This made dancing around it even tougher. Life Orb was also a great choice though, as the sheer power it offered let Excadrill mow down some of its usual checks more easily once they'd taken just a bit of chip damage, most notably Rotom Wash. Excadrill had a pool of very specific physical walls that could check it fairly: Gliscor, Skarmory, and Tangrowth, but those Pokemon were also tasked with dealing with other metagame threats and thus could be overwhelmed easily when Excadrill was paired with fellow sand abusers Landorus Incarnate and Terrakion. Of course, there was the option to change the weather with rain, but if Excadrill got in against a rain team with sand up, Politoed wouldn't be able to switch into it at all safely, giving rain teams similar issues. The amount of strain that Excadrill placed on both team building and playing was considered incredibly unhealthy, especially once it started using leftovers and rapid spin. Even if its counters were healthy, none of them could stop Excadrill from clearing the field of hazard, making it and its team much more difficult to wear down. Thus, Excadrill was eventually banned from OU. Late in Black and White 2, however, Excadrill made a return as the metagame had become overrun by hazards and players wanted some recourse against it. Its alternate abilities in Sand Force and Mode Breaker had been released, and a complex ban was instituted to ensure that it couldn't use Sand Rush on sand teams, as it was agreed that that would still be overwhelming, even with the addition of Landorus T, especially since Black and White 2 had gifted Excadrill a powerful secondary stab in Ironhead. It did, however, begin to use Sand Rush on rain teams, and that put opposing sand teams in an uncomfortable catch-22 situation. If they used their sand to slow down a rain assault, which was much of the point of sand, then they risked being swept by a Pokemon that was so strong they weren't allowed to use it themselves. But if they allowed the rain to go uncontested, they would have a seriously difficult time withstanding all of its attacks. The combination of Excadrill in sand and Scarf Keldeo in rain meant that no matter what, rain teams had a terrific fast cleaning option. Excadrill's ability to relieve Spike's pressure had been accepted as a generally good thing, but outspeeding everything in the game in sand was agreed to be unhealthy in general, and Sand Rush was banned. Excadrill shifted back to sand teams after that, less as a Swords Dance sweeper and more as a source of rapid spin support. With Sand Force, it was still naturally powerful, putting a ton of pressure on Pokemon like Ferrothorn and Reuniclus. It also liked Protect in the last slot. This safely scouted the intentions of Scarflander's T while racking up leftovers recovery, preventing Excadrill from getting worn down and allowing it to spin throughout the game. This allowed it to increase its already excellent longevity, stemming from immunities to sand and toxic, as well as a quadruple resistance to Stealth Rock that it out-healed with leftovers, a distinction it shared with only 3 other Pokemon in the entire game: Steelix, Lucario, and Cobalion. Mold Breaker was also an excellent ability, as it nullified Levitate and thus turned Rotom Wash from one of Excadrill's best counters into just another victim for its Earthquake. Excadrill was also quite bulky with a bit of investment thanks to its enormous HP stat. This, alongside its Steel typing, allowed it to take Latios's Draco Meteor in a pinch, which was crucial for keeping its teammate Tyranitar healthy to take on other threats like Alakazam. Overall, Excadrill was one of Black and White's most important new Pokemon. From its original place as the sand-defining OU turned Uber, to the freed anti-sand tool for Rain, to its role as an excellent offensive-defensive utility Pokemon on sand once again. Whenever it's been OU, it's been at the forefront of it and significantly shaped the metagame. Excadrill was also excellent in Ubers, as its Sand Rush set turned sand into a legitimate style of team, even up there with the Sun and Rain that were fueled by tier titans Groudon and Kyogre. Spikes were incredibly powerful in Ubers, and Excadrill's powerful Swords Dance boosted critical hit rate Shadow Claws put immense pressure on the tier spin blockers, Arceus Ghost, and both forms of Giratina, allowing Excadrill to get a rapid spin off. It also posed a significant sweeping threat. Groudon was a great counter, but Excadrill's teammate Tyranitar would often lure it in and damage it hard with Fire Blast boosted by Groudon's own Sun, which would quickly put it in range to be threatened by Excadrill's +2 Earthquake. Excadrill's typing was terrific defensively too, primarily because of its electric immunity. This helped against various, usually choice-restricted thunders from Pokemon like Dialga and Kyogre, as it hard countered the most common variants of Electric Arceus, and it was a nigh-perfect check to Zekrom. Black and White 2 made things even easier for Excadrill sweeping, as new additions like Kyurem White, Genesect, and the return of the Soul Dew Lati twins meant it had more and more victims. Excadrill also went pure defensive with a bulky Mold Breaker set in Rain, as it completely walled standard Stealth Rock Dialga, allowing it to spin against it while setting up its own Stealth Rock. Mold Breaker was especially nice because it broke through the occasional Xatu Magic Bounce instead of having its rocks sent back at it. Overall, Excadrill was a top Pokemon, even in the topmost tier. It should come as no surprise that Excadrill experienced its fair share of success in doubles as well. Excadrill's amazing typing translated well to doubles, as did its choice of go-to attacking moves in Earthquake and Rock Slide. Excadrill's Steel typing meant it could serve as a sometimes switch-in to the horde of dragons that dominated the metagame, and with Tyranitar already being a premier Pokemon in doubles, it wasn't a huge leap for some players to just slap an Excadrill on their team and go to town. However, it does bear mentioning that there were costs to running Excatitar, namely a horrible shared set of weakness in fighting, water, and ground. This is arguably more impactful in doubles than in singles, where water and ground have powerful spread moves, and removing the opposing Pokemon isn't as straightforward as in singles, where simply knocking out the opposing threat was good enough to handle it. And you know what they say about offense being the best defense. And of course, Excadrill's biggest nemesis was maybe the most ubiquitous Pokemon in VGC history, Landorus Therian, who was both competition and counter to Excadrill. As such, Excadrill wasn't quite the one-size-fits-all sweeper it could have been. Even though its setup was simple, it still needed significant support to perform against problem matchups. In 2011, Excadrill actually had a hard time staying extremely relevant, as the limited format encouraged the use of many of its worst enemies. Although Landorus Therian didn't exist yet, the other genies still gave Excadrill a hard time, as did Conkeldurr, Scrafty, and Amoonguss, who were all staples of VGC 2011. Nevertheless, Excadrill saw good play as soon as the decks expanded in 2012, even nabbing a World's Top 4 finish at the hands of Joe Pukalski, who built his entire team around facilitating a sweep from his Life Orb Excadrill, which ran Protect, Earthquake, Rockslide, and X-Scissor to hit opposing Cresselius. Joe made use of Excadrill's disgusting speed tier when boosted to invest almost fully into bulk, creating a surprisingly bulky sweeper. He rounded out his team with support mons and ground immunities to help Excadrill quake with impunity, including Cresselia, Salamence, Rotom Heat, Gastrodon, and the requisite Tyranitar. Excadrill only carved out more of a place for itself in 2013, stringing together a list of impressive tournament placements as it used its speed to outrun the competition, with players using a variety of small item and move changes to tailor the mold to its specific conditions. Oliver Smith Valenti gave Excadrill an expert belt on his run to second place at the Houston Regionals, additionally swapping out Earthquake for Drill Run so he could use Excadrill's stab with more impunity. In Virginia, Patrick Werford Broderick was one of the few players to use Excadrill without T-Tar, opting for a bulky leftovers and substitute variant to take advantage of other players' sand rather than setting his own. While Werford placed 8th, Simon Yip managed a top 4 finish, opting for a Life Orb variant similar to Joe Pukalski's mole from Worlds, albeit with a bit more speed to outspeed any boosted base 70 speed Pokemon. As the meta developed, some players started to give their Excadrill a ground gem to good success. Zach Braviaris Drogcomp finished 1st in North America in the online March International Challenge, and James Bunkley followed that up with an 8th in the April International Challenge. The rise of Breloom and its Mach Punches posed some threat to Excadrill, but Sandrush Drill continued its success, with Paul McCary Hornack placing top 4 at the Utah Regionals and Blake Hopper's win at the Nugget Bridge Invitational. Excadrill saw significant success in other regions as well, with 7 top 16 finishes across Europe's 3 national champions in Milan, Bochum, and Birmingham. However, it was only in Birmingham that Excadrill cracked the top 8, with Lee Osiris Provost finishing top 4 and Daniel Nolan finishing top 8. Finally, particular mention has to go to Ben Nightblade 7000 Rothman's win at the Grassroots Apex 2013 tournament just for innovation, as he utilized Magnet Rise Excadrill, which, if you know anything about Apex 2013, seems like a fitting bit of chaos for that particular tournament. However, Magnet Rise Excadrill wasn't the biggest outlier of the 2013 season, as that honor goes to Randy R. Inanimate Qua, as Randy opted for a strategy uniquely distinct from what most VGC players usually do. Instead of pivoting between different teams throughout the season, he used basically the same team almost all year long, and at its center was an Excadrill distinctly unlike the other ones being used, a Mold Breaker Excadrill. Sandrush's popularity had a tendency to overshadow the fact that Excadrill's other ability, Mold Breaker, is also incredible in its own right. Randy first hit on Mold Breaker Excadrill at the Nugget Bridge Major, where he used a Choice Band Excadrill sporting Earthquake, Drill Run, X-Scissor, and Rock Slide. While this was different than the team that would come to define Randy's 2013 season, the most important components were there. A Tyranitar that would bait opponents into expecting sand, Follow Me Togekiss, who had incredible synergy with Excadrill and could provide it with speed control via Tailwind or Thunder Wave, so it felt like it was in sand anyways. And finally, Mold Breaker, to obliterate opponents expecting their Levitates to keep them safe. With Choice Band's additional power, Excadrill could tear through Pokemon that might usually expect to be safe like Metagross or Tyranitar, and Mold Breaker made dead weight out of quote-unquote counters like Bronzong or Rotom Wash. Randy ended up winning the Nugget Bridge Major over world runner-up at the time, Wolf Glick. By Salem Regionals, Randy had hit on the 6 Pokemon he'd carry for the rest of the season: Excadrill, Togekiss, Tyranitar, Latios, Breloom, and Bisharp. For Excadrill, the most notable change came in 2 parts. Randy removed its Choice Band for Focus Sash, and to make up for the lost power, added in Swords Dance instead along with Protect. While losing Drill Run and X-Scissor made Excadrill somewhat less flexible in one way, the fact that it could switch moves and bait out double targeting with Protect more than made up for it. Sure enough, Randy's team was incredibly successful, garnering him a win at Salem Regionals, a 1st place in the January International Challenge, and a top 4 finish at the US Nationals, the highest placing Excadrill at the tournament, and the only one in top 16. Of course, Randy brought the same team to Worlds, but unfortunately, he fell somewhat short of his other results, finishing 18th due to an unfortunate Rock Slide miss that put him just shy of top 8. A sad end to an incredible season. However, that wasn't the end of the road for Excadrill. While its usage wasn't extremely high at Worlds, it still had a few other good placements, such as these players on screen. In the end, it was Enosh Human Shakar who would take Excadrill the distance, finishing 6th place with a unique Excadrill team that also didn't feature Tyranitar. In Enosh's case, he ran a max speed Excadrill with Life Orb and the expected attacks, Rock Slide, Earthquake, and X-Scissor. Enosh's Excadrill was spec'd to be faster than his Latios, specifically to punish opposing Cresselia with a combo of Excadrill and Draco Meteor, and additionally gave him a huge advantage against any opposing Tyranitar teams. His fast Excadrill could outspeed other Adamant Excadrills to gain the leg up, and if they were running a slow sand team, then Enosh's combo of Amoonguss, Jellicent, and Hitmontop was extremely effective in dispatching them. Excadrill was a supremely versatile Pokemon on Enosh's team, able to form pins with his Pokemon, pressure opposing Psychic types, deal with sand, and make use of his own team's various utility options in Tailwind, Trick Room, and Redirection via Amoonguss. Excadrill returned to OU in the 6th generation, having taken a huge blow with the removal of permanent weather. Now it only had a limited amount of turns where it was faster than everything. However, that didn't stop it from unleashing terror on the opponent, who often had to make risky predictions just to outlast the sand. Not only could Excadrill simply come back later and make them repeat the process, this time with a weakened team, it was also much more difficult to outmaneuver safely if Excadrill's partner Tyranitar was holding Smooth Rock to extend its sand duration. Excadrill threatened a large portion of the metagame, particularly enjoying the addition of the new fairy types. The Clefable that was everywhere was just waiting to get crushed by its Iron Head. Excadrill also remained the last vestige of Rapid Spin in an OU metagame dominated by the newly buffed Defog. Being able to maintain one's own Stealth Rock while getting rid of the opponents was quite the advantage, especially since most players were used to having to concede their own. Excadrill had the ability to clear Stealth Rock without inviting the common Stealth Rock user Heatran to come back in and set the rocks up again. This made it particularly excellent at supporting Stealth Rock weak Pokemon such as Talonflame and both Mega Charizards. Excadrill wasn't just a sand abuser though, as it branched out to include a couple different sets in its repertoire. The first was a Choice Scarf variant with Mold Breaker. This made it a solid general revenge killer that could also provide utility with Rapid Spin. Its newfound speed made it a threat against many offense teams, as it now instantly outpaced Pokemon like Keldeo, Mega Metagross, and Mega Lopunny without needing Tyranitar to set up sand for it. Squads that relied on Rotom Wash and Latios as their ground immunities, as many did, were in major trouble thanks to Mold Breaker nullifying their Levitate. The second set that Excadrill began using was a pure utility variant that aimed to stick around and thus held leftovers. Most of the time it ran Mold Breaker, but it could run Sand Rush if used alongside Tyranitar, letting it become more of a threat. However, its goal wasn't to sweep. It didn't even carry Swords Dance. As always, it used Rapid Spin to clear hazards, and it had plenty of opportunity to do that given how easily it switched into the incredibly common Clefable. Iron Head was important so it could actually threaten Clefable, whose Calm Mind sets were one of the most dangerous Pokemon in the metagame. After its obligatory stab Earthquake, it rounded out its moveset with more support, either setting up Stealth Rock for its team or using Toxic to nail Slowbro, making it more difficult for it to wall Excadrill's teammates. Spin utility was important as the metagame moved in a more spike-centric direction. Most Defoggers lacked the tools to reliably keep up against those kinds of teams, so Excadrill's place in the metagame was both highly unique and important. Overall, Excadrill was a top Pokemon in Gen 6 OU. Excadrill also had a niche in Gen 6 Ubers. In Sand, it outsped Xerneas after a Geomancy and slammed it with a super effective Iron Head. Unfortunately, this niche was lost once Xerneas started running Timid, but Excadrill found more use in Oraz as a suicide Stealth Rock lead on hyper offense teams. Unlike Deoxys Speed, Excadrill's Mold Breaker allowed it to set up rocks even in the face of the Magic Bouncers Mega Sableye and Mega Diancie, while against opposing Deoxys Speed. Then Excadrill ensured Deoxys Speed never got hazards thanks to Rapid Spin. With Toxic, it would cripple any support Arceus attempting to defog on it. Getting up rocks while denying the opponents was not only huge for early game offensive momentum, but allowed sets like Sash Rayquaza to flourish, as well as keeping Mega Salamence at full health. Excadrill's speed also let it get the jump on most Primal Groudon, and it completely blanked Klefki, so it could even potentially put in work later in the match. Excadrill found itself a new kind of niche in this generation of Ubers, and though it was overall smaller than the previous generation, it was still highly effective. Excadrill was absent from the VGC 2014 metagame as it wasn't included in the Kalos decks, but it returned with a vengeance for 2015. Excadrill could finally make use of its other stab type in Steel, now that Fairies gave it something relevant to hit. What's more, its Steel typing was only more valuable as a resistance, while the lack of a ground gem gave it slightly fewer options in terms of what items to use. Life Orb or Focus Sash were both still great options for most scenarios. Excadrill especially appreciated being paired with Mega Salamence, as Excadrill could spam Earthquake with impunity to remove the Steel types that stymied Salamence, while Mega Salamence's Aerialate boosted Hyper Voices and Double Edges created powerful pins that would overwhelm opponents. Excadrill immediately started to pop up in regionals and other tournaments, with a good degree of success following. Matthew Greaves was an early adopter of Excadrill as he followed up on a top 16 finish at California regionals by placing top 4 in Utah by using Excadrill with an upgraded version of its most reliable partner in Mega Tyranitar. In Wisconsin, Wesley Morioka used Excadrill with Mega Salamence and no Tyranitar at all to finish 4th. As the metagame progressed, a particular archetype of sand that used both of these Pokemon started to take shape. As it was popularized by Japanese players, the team of Excadrill, Megaments, T-Tar, Amoonguss, Aegislash, and a water type such as Rotom Wash or Azumarill became known as Japan's Sand, and saw a good deal of success, including Aaron Riker's top 8 finish at Georgia Regionals, Matthew Rowe's win at the Australian Nationals, and Arash Omadi's 2nd place at the UK Nats. Excadrill also saw some use outside of the Japan Sand archetype, although it was still always paired with Mega Salamence and T-Tar, as Dylan Bowie finished 4th at the Brisbane Regionals, using it with Sylveon and Talonflame. Brendan Webb used a Volcarona and Ferrothorn to finish 6th at the Australian Nationals, and Miguel Martí de la Torre brought Blaziken and Milotic with his Excadrill to his 6th place at the UK Nationals, and Alex Underhill opted for Gastrodon, Rotom and Cresselia alongside his Life Orb Excadrill on his own. And what do you know it? 6th place finish at the US Nationals, so who knows what it is with Excadrill's obsession with 6th place. However, Worlds showed that Excadrill's niche was still a small one. As the meta shifted towards a different Japanese archetype in Chalk, Excadrill found itself hard-pressed to contend with Landorus Therian's near universal presence, which both countered it and took up its slot as a ground type. Alex Gomez was the only trainer to even bring Excadrill to Worlds, finishing 33rd and giving Excadrill an unceremonious end to an otherwise alright season. Of course, 2016 were harsh conditions for Excadrill, and while it nominally could appreciate the high popularity of Xerneas as an opportunity for it to use its Steel typing, it was hard for a Pokemon that was weak to water, ground, and fire, and that relied on weather other than rain or sun, to thrive with Kyogre and Groudon around. Excadrill retreated to its subterranean lair once more, unable to make as great an impact in Gen 6 VGC as it would have hoped. Gen 7 Z moves were a terrific boost to Excadrill. The extra power outburst made it even more difficult to check sets both with and without a Swords Dance. Traditional answers like Landorus T and Gliscor got utterly crushed by Iron Head powered up by Steelium Z into a vicious corkscrew crash, while Rotom Wash, Zapdos, Pelipper, Gyarados, and Mega Charizard Y were throttled by Giga Impact powered up by Normalium Z into a brutal breakneck blitz. The ever-present Tangrowth, who's normally a fine natural Excadrill check, couldn't handle either of these Zs. Excadrill could afford to run Giga Impact and give up Rapid Spin because there were now more viable defoggers, namely Tapu Fini, which took pressure off of Excadrill to act as both an offensive threat and team utility. Come Ultra Sun and Moon, even more defoggers arrived, most notably Tornadus T. However, Excadrill could and often did spin so that its team could maintain Stealth Rock while removing the opponents, because just like in the previous generation, this was a notable advantage against most teams in a defog-laden metagame. Old faces like Heatran and Clefable were as vulnerable as ever, and Excadrill also absolutely destroyed many of the new Pokemon. It hit 3 or 4 Tapu super effectively, while also trashing Magearna and Toxapex. It also had excellent defensive utility, as its immunities to Electric and resistances to Fairy, Psychic, and Steel meant several things. It walled just about every Tapu Koko, could switch in against the vast majority of Magearna sets, even blocking its momentum-grabbing Volt Switch, and it could even stave off attempted sweeps from nearly every one of Scarf Tapu Lele's moves or Smart Strike locked Kartana. This was just Excadrill naturally too. In Sand, it was able to retaliate offensively against just about every fast, powerful, and generally dangerous threat in the meta, which was incredibly useful given how many of them were running around. The Pokemon it checked ranged from Dragon Dance Mega Charizard X to Protean Greninja to Z Kyurem Black to Specs Blacephalon and everything in between. Once again, Excadrill also proved itself to be more than just a Sand threat. The Suicide Leaf speed with Mold Breaker and Focus Sash from Oraz Ubers worked just as well to set up its hard-hitting teammates on hyper offense teams. Stealth rocking in the face of Mega Diancie and Mega Sableye Magic Bounce was incredibly valuable, as it prevented common stealth rockers like Heatran and Mega Tyranitar from setting up at all, and with Rock Tomb it could even keep faster Landorus Therian stealth rock away reliably, allowing one of its teammates to come in afterwards with a Rock's advantage and thus the ideal opportunity to get the snowball rolling. Rock Tomb also messed with any defog attempts from Tornadius Therian. Excadrill's ability to prevent or get rid of opposing stealth rock was generally useful, as the lack of chip damage on neutral or even resistant Pokemon made them more difficult to revenge kill, which is always useful in a game of inches like Pokemon, especially on high octane teams like the ones Excadrill found itself on. But it was especially useful for enabling some of the most dangerous Pokemon in the game, most notably the stealth rock weak Z Gyarados. Overall, Gen 7 Excadrill was once again an incredibly key metagame force that successfully fulfilled a multitude of offense and utility roles. While Excadrill had to spend yet another year on the bench due to its absence from a regional dex in 2017, it was able to mount a miniature comeback in 2018, once it had completed its tunnel system all the way over to Alola. The introduction of Z moves was actually huge for Excadrill. It was no longer forced to choose between Earthquake and Drill Run, as Z Earthquake gave it the one-time single target move it so desired. What's more, Excadrill's Steel type was fairly useful against the Top Boost, even though two of them were neutral to Steel. The fact that it could tank Tapu Koko's moves was still invaluable, as well as its status as a check to Tapu Lele. Excadrill could additionally appreciate Tapu Lele's presence as a boon for its own defensive prowess. The fact that priority fighting moves were discouraged was of huge benefit to Excadrill either way. Mold Breaker was mostly a thing of the past by now, as Excadrill needed the speed from Sand to differentiate itself from Landorus T in any meaningful way, and the only levitating Pokemon that it cared about were the rare Cresselia or Latitwin. Sagen Park gave Excadrill a warm welcome to 2018 by winning the Korean Winter League with it, giving it its usual partners of Titar, Megament, and Azumarill, as well as Clefairy and Thundurus Therian. This team would prove popular enough that a few other players used it for their own tournament runs, including Nicholas Bingham at the Oceania Internationals and Augusta Chico's second place at the Argentina special event. Excadrill continued to assert a small but significant presence throughout the year, with other placements including Ryan Tan's 8th place at the Dallas Regionals, Julian Martinez's 4th at the Uruguay special event, Lin Kun Wu's 5th at the Taiwan Regionals, Aditya Subramanian's 8th place at the Madison Regionals, and Ian Lim's 7th at the Singapore special event, and David Kotis 2nd at the DreamHack Valencia special event. While every single one of these teams included Tyranitar, not all of them included Salamence. In these cases, it would actually be the T-Tar that would Mega Evolve. The most successful example of such a team was in Melbourne, where Gunter Proboro managed to give Excadrill a win with his squad of Amoonguss, Mega T-Tar, Tapu Lele, Milotic, and Zapdos. Finally, Excadrill had one other notable accomplishment above the regional level, as Len Duel brought it to 6th place in the North American International Championships, with a team of Amoonguss, Tyranitar, Salamence, Cresselia, and Gyarados. But still, Excadrill was once more plagued by the presence of Landorus, who is simply the better pick in most situations, and whose overwhelming usage at the World Championships was a stark contrast to Excadrill's own total absence. However, Excadrill was able to find some use in the restricted format of 2019, mostly due to two things. In the Sun and Moon series, Excadrill didn't have to contend with the Primals ruining its day, and Yveltal's new popularity allowed Excadrill to use both its Steel and Ground typings to full effect. While most of its limited placements were outside top 8, one player was able to give it a top cut finish, or rather two of them, as Jamie Boyd finished 3rd and 8th at the Cairns and Bolzano special events. Jamie used the same core 5 of Excadrill, Superior, Yveltal, Xerneas, and Salazzle at both events, with the last slot going to Como O at Cairns and ditto in Bolzano. But his Excadrill was just as oddball. It was actually a throwback all the way to Randy Qua's original Excadrill from 2013, a choice band Mold Breaker Excadrill, sporting a huge amount of bulk along with Earthquake, Stomping Tantrum, Rock Slide, and Iron Head. Jamie's build let his Excadrill one-hit KO standard Xerneas, Incineroar, and Stakataka, while also giving it a good chance to live Incineroar Flare Blitz, always living low investment attack Groudon's Precipice Blades, and avoiding the 2-hit KO from a boosted Xerneas' Dazzling Gleam. Thus, even though it carried a choice band, this drill was useful in a huge amount of situations, especially removing the pesky Xerneas, and could pair up extremely well alongside Yveltal. While some players experimented with Excadrill alongside Mega Rayquaza, or even with the old pal Tyranitar in the Ultra Series, it was only Jamie who gave it a top 8 finish. And once again, Excadrill closed out a year of VGC without a huge impact. Excadrill survived Gen 8's Dexit, as did its lifelong partner Tyranitar, and thus Sand teams lived to see another generation of OU dominance right from the onset of Sword and Shield. It may have lost Z-moves, but its rapid spin was buffed. Not only was it now 50 base power, it even gave Excadrill a +1 boost to its speed, making it both hazard removal and an offensive tool in one fell swoop. It was one of the most fearsome Dynamax abusers at the beginning of the generation too, before the mechanic was banned in OU. Eventually, Excadrill shifted to using Mold Breaker more even on its standard Swords Dance set. Rapid Spin somewhat removed the need for Sand Rush and thus removed the need for Tyranitar to partner with it, allowing Excadrill to fit on a wider variety of teams. More importantly, Rotom Heat adorned with heavy-duty boots to not get lured down by Stealth Rock was absolutely everywhere, and it was a massive pain. Without Mold Breaker, it was a perfect Excadrill counter, but with Mold Breaker, it wouldn't dream of switching in. It also prevented the incredibly popular Hydreigon from switching in safely. Of course, Sand Rush was still a top-tier sweeper, especially when opting for Life Orb over the usual leftovers. The extra power kick helped break through defensive stalwarts like Mandibuzz. And speaking of top-tier Pokemon Excadrill preyed on, Clefable and Toxapex were as dominant, common, and prone to getting cleaved open by Excadrill stabs as ever. Excadrill also made a fine Stealth Rock user, as its Mold Breaker prevented its setups from being blocked by Hatterene's Magic Bounce. It could run it over Swords Dance on its standard offensive leftover set, or it could run its Suicide Lead set over hyper-offensive teams once more. This time, the Suicide Lead concept was taken more literally with the addition of Steel Beam, a move that took 50% of Excadrill's max HP, meaning that if it used it at 50% or lower, it was KO'd. The purpose of this was to block the fog. Excadrill had previously lacked the tools other Suicide Leads had to do so, namely Taunt or Explosion, but now it could get the rocks up and take itself out before the opposing Defogger could get rid of the rocks, allowing its fast-paced team to start hitting hard with rocks up, rocks being as crucial as ever to help break through walls. Steel Beam was a special move, so it wouldn't do any relevant damage to much of anything, but that was unimportant. It was all about letting Excadrill block the fog. Overall, Gen 8 Excadrill has been one of the metagame's top Pokemon since day one, and it doesn't look to slow down anytime soon. While VGC 2020's meta is still ongoing, so far it's shaping up to be Excadrill's best year of VGC ever. Finally, Excadrill emerges from the depths to showcase the potential it's never been able to quite reach before. Seriously, this thing is incredibly popular. In the 3 top 16s of Bochum Regionals, Dallas Regionals, and the Oceania Internationals, Excadrill was on 13 different teams. That's over a quarter of the teams that all featured Excadrill. At the Oceania Internationals, 15 of the top 32 teams used Excadrill and Togekiss, so just under half. So why is Excadrill so popular? Let us count the ways. First, its access to high horsepower is a great substitute for the loss of Z crystals and gives it the strong single target ground move it's always wanted. Second, if you've watched any VGC 2020, you know it's dominated by Togekiss, and if Randy Qual taught us anything, it's that Togekiss and Excadrill were meant for each other. Thirdly, Dynamax is actually a great mechanic for Excadrill. It's already naturally good bulk and typing, give it ample opportunity to proc a weakness policy, while Max Rockfall, Steel Spike, and Quake are all some of the best max moves around, as Excadrill can boost its defenses or even set up its own weather. If not running weakness policy, good old Focus Sash is still very reliable. But the biggest reason Excadrill has finally burrowed its way to the top more than anything else is the adjustments to how speed is calculated. Sword and Shield introduced mid-turn speed calculation, which is absolutely huge for Excadrill. Now when Tyranitar switches in and starts a Sandstorm, it immediately doubles Excadrill's speed rather than taking effect on the next turn. This increases Excadrill's flexibility exponentially, forcing players to consider when it might kick into first gear at all times. As we said before, Excadrill has a huge amount of placing so far, and as such, we're still only going to talk about top 8 appearances. At the Bochum Regionals, Jonathan Marston finished 6th using the unconventional choice of Hippowdon as a Sand Settler and Indeedee as a Redirector, and in Dallas, Ryan Chambers finished 7th with the more traditional Tyranitar. Oceania International saw 3 drill teams in the top 8, all using Tyranitar and Togekiss. James Casaros finished 6th, Yu Motada finished 5th, and Ragav Malavia took home the bronze medal. Alexandra Lazardi gave Excadrill a 2nd place at the Malmo Regionals, and it had 2 top 8 finishes at the Perth Regionals, with Mark Murray's 5th and Sam Lim's 3rd. While Excadrill is still a potent force in 2020, several factors had led it to a bit of a downtick in its usage. First of all, the suspension of all regionals obviously changes the shape of Pokemon in general at the moment. However, However, the metagame has also shifted slightly. Excadrill Togekiss T-Tar was an extraordinarily good combo, but it was also easy to use and slightly predictable. As such, it's no surprise it had such incredible usage early on when people were still figuring out the format. As time has gone by, adaptation towards teams such as Trick Room Sun or Trick Room with Conkeldurr have started to exploit Excadrill more. What's more, the DLC has made things slightly hard for Excadrill as well. Gigantamax Lapras can be a very tough matchup, as can some of the starters that made their way over through Pokemon Home, such as Primarina and Venusaur. Incineroar and Conkeldurr are also perennial thorns in Excadrill's side. With more DLC on the way and Landorus Therian looming on the horizon, it's likely Excadrill's usage could drop even more. But it still had an explosion of popularity that's likely to send aftershocks throughout all of 2020. Excadrill may have hit a snag in the road, but don't expect him to disappear anytime soon. The mechanics changes, his synergy with Togekiss, and the overwhelming speed and power he brings to the table guarantee that he's here to stay. And that's it. So how good was Excadrill actually? Well, it has played a huge part of OU ever since it was introduced in the 5th generation. It was Pokemon's first true offensive sand abuser, defining much of early Black and White with its sand rush antics and being so devastating that it was banned. It was then brought back after 4 years only to be restricted even further, but significantly impacted the metagame once more in important offensive utility roles. The following generation saw Sandstorm's permanence come to an end, but that didn't stop Excadrill from abusing it heavily in the limited windows it had, while also taking on more and more of utility roles thanks to the auspicious typing and the importance of Rapid Spin. It's also been a pretty good Pokemon in VGC despite its off seasons, as outspeeding everything in sand and hitting with such a powerful stab spread Earthquake is a devastating combination. Overall, Excadrill has been an incredible Pokemon. Thanks for watching everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and in the comments I want to know, what do you think about competitive Excadrill? Would you change it at all? I mean, it's already kind of powerful, but whatever it is, let me know in the comments. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.